Joining me now is our regular US expert, Professor Simon Jackman. I guess the encouraging thing, multiple visits now. Be fascinating if, some sort of concession can be made. We know, all the strategic stuff's going on, but so many arguments around economies and trading between these two nations. What, am I being delusional again? Any hope we might get something out of all of this?
Look, I thought the earlier commentator you had on nailed it in terms of low expectations, and that the fact that they're talking, I think, represents a little bit of a breakthrough at this point. Tom, for some guidance on this, I keep going back to what Secretary of State Blinken said in one of the first speeches he made as US Secretary of State, and the three C's about the China relationship: cooperate where you can, compete and contest in other domains where you must, and striking that balance is very delicate work. And I think the good news here is that the US is able to sort of, looks like where they're looking for that first C, the cooperate domain, they're trying to get officials on that side of the ledger over meeting with their Chinese counterparts. The other thing to note here, Tom, I don't know if this is widely reported yet, but I'm just hearing that John Kerry, climate change envoy, will be going to China next week as well. So there's another check mark, if you will, in the cooperate column. But a long way to go. And you got to wonder about some of these conversations the Secretary of the Treasury will be having, because at the same time that they're trying to reestablish dialogue, it is argy-bargy in the critical mineral space. Some of the restrictions the US is putting in place on Chinese access to American tech, where America is sourcing its tech from. So very delicate work for Secretary Yellen in her time in China.
That's becoming increasingly something Australia could be involved in with allies and so on. The environmental aspect, fascinating, because not much will happen on reducing emissions unless those two big players agree on things. I guess the other interesting thing about this is when you say, oh, maybe the US goes there and offers an olive branch and, they're all sipping tea by the end of it, is Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, they respect strength. If you're seen as just sort of giving things up, they're saying, oh, what's happening here? What's next? This is the reality, isn't it? The type of negotiators and the sort of cultural element to this, I suppose.
Yeah, Tom, as we've discussed numerous times, a big audience for your foreign policy is your domestic political constituency. Perhaps the one thing going in Xi Jinping's favor in that is his control over the messages that he gets to send his domestic audience. So very limited, perhaps, in not being seen to be too conciliatory to an America widely perceived and widely, the message to the Chinese people is that this is all America's fault. So yeah, above the fold, don't expect too much of a warm embrace. Keep it very polite and very cordial, but perhaps behind the scenes, not necessarily, I think, in this visit, but we'll see what happens with John Kerry's visit on climate change. Can behind closed doors, you can start to really make some substantive progress, mindful of the big handbrake there is on any public perception of getting too chummy with the Americans. And by the way, to some extent, as we head into a presidential election in the United States, there's an awful lot of sort of pull that way as well, as American voters are looking at how this Democratic administration is too close or not close enough with China.
Well, you mentioned that election. Let's just cast our mind back to the midterms. Disappointing performance from the Republicans. Ron DeSantis riding high. Bits change. He's just had a sort of bit by bit slip in support. Is he still a genuine contender, do you think? And what's gone wrong?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Tom. And indeed, the news out of the United States in all the political chatter and commentary is what really made news was one of Ron DeSantis' own campaign strategists going on television and saying, yeah, we're in trouble. We're a long way behind Donald Trump. The one thing he did point to, and it's worth keeping an eye on, is not so much the national poll numbers, but how is DeSantis faring in some of the early states, Iowa and New Hampshire. When Donald Trump is not appearing in court, he's spending an awful lot of time in New Hampshire at the moment. But the word from the campaign trail is that, look, compared to the seasoned performer, shall we say, that Donald Trump is, everybody else pales in comparison. and DeSantis is being widely characterised as having had a charisma bypass, not exactly the most scintillating stump speaker. And it's so retail, those politics in Iowa and New Hampshire. And it's something that Donald Trump has dined out on for his entire adult life. And I think something that Ron DeSantis, he may be a popular conservative governor in Florida, but how that goes over in Des Moines, Iowa, and in Manchester, New Hampshire, it's a real winnowing the American primary system. One that Donald Trump has done and mastered before, but it's a whole new ballgame for Ron DeSantis and others that would like to take the nomination away from Donald Trump.
Yeah, Donald Trump just shortening in the betting markets. DeSantis some chance.
Oh, yeah.
The rest write your own ticket. Charisma bypass. Gee, it's a brutal sport politics, isn't it? Remind me never to go into it.
My gift.
Considering that.